Because you know I'm all about that bass, about that bass.
No,
Dad?
I'm all about that bass,
Dad?
that bass. No,
Dad!
What?
You know you're gonna get a copyright strike for that, right?
Worth it. Because I'm all about that bass. No, Ultra. Hello, welcome to Rando Tech Info, and today, in case you couldn't tell, we're going to be talking about the base Galaxy S22 and why you might want to consider picking it up instead of the 22 Plus or Ultra. Now don't get me wrong, I have nothing against those other two phones, and in fact I'm hoping to get my hands on my S22 Ultra sometime in the next couple of weeks. But I do think this phone has some advantages over the Ultra, and I do think it could very well be the better option for a lot of people. And without wasting any time, let's start with this phone's most obvious advantage: price. You can grab this phone off of Samsung.com right now for $799, and while I know that is certainly not cheap, it is cheaper than the S22 Plus and 22 Ultra, which cost $999 and $1,199 respectively. You can also save a few $100s if you are willing to trade in an old device, and there's some pretty sweet carrier deals going on as well, some of which basically let you grab this phone for nothing as long as you're willing to extend your contract. But no matter how you pick up this phone, it's almost always going to be $200 cheaper than the Plus and $400 cheaper than the Ultra, and I think you have to ask yourself, are those phones worth the extra cash, especially if we consider all of these phones are more alike than different. The base storage version of all three S22 models have the same Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 processor, the same amount of RAM, and the same amount of storage. They all support sub-6, mid-band, and millimeter wave 5G, and they all come packing very capable wide, ultra-wide, and 3x telephoto lenses. Although the camera setup on the Ultra is a bit different. More on that later. They have the same under-display ultrasonic fingerprint sensor, and they all have gorgeous AMOLED displays with 120Hz refresh rates. But the similarities don't even end there. They can all shoot video in 8K, they have all received the same software upgrades that improve night photography and videography over last year's S21 models. They all come with the same camera features, such as auto framing and pro modes. All three are packing Gorilla Glass Victus Plus on the front and back, which replaces the plastic back found on the base S21. They all have IP68 water resistance, wireless and reverse wireless charging, loud dual firing speakers.
Do you hear how loud that is?
They all run Android 12 with Samsung's 4.1 UI out of the box, and they are all guaranteed 4 years of full software updates and support, which is industry leading for an Android device and only beaten by the 5 years of software support offered by Apple on the iPhones. The three phones in the S22 line definitely have more in common than they don't have in common. That said, there are obviously some differences we do need to mention. One of the first and most obvious differences between these phones is the display. Diagonally, the screen on the base S22 comes in at 6.1 inches compared to the 6.6-inch display found on the Plus and the 6.8-inch display found on the Ultra. Now, whether or not you see this as an advantage or a disadvantage will largely depend on what you value. For example, if you value pocketability, then you will probably prefer the size of the base S22 to its S22 counterparts. There are other differences between the displays as well. Both the base 22 and 22 Plus have 1080p resolution, while the Ultra has a 2K display. The Plus and the Ultra supposedly have brighter displays that can reach 1750 nits, while the base S22 has a max brightness of 1300 nits. And while all three phone displays max out at the same refresh rate of 120Hz, the Ultra can save you some additional battery by going down to as low as 1Hz. The base and Plus S22s can only go down to 48Hz. Honestly, in my opinion, these are all pretty minor differences. One difference that might matter to you is the displays on the base and Plus versions of the phone are flat, while the Ultra is curved. Most of the people I know actually prefer flat displays, so I think this will actually be an advantage for the base and Plus models of this phone over the Ultra. At the end of the day, I think it's important to remember that Samsung makes the best displays in the business, and I feel like you're going to be impressed with whatever display you wind up with. The next big difference we have between the 22s are the cameras. Now, I said earlier in the video that all three phones offer up capable wide, ultra wide, and 3x lenses, and that is true. But you do get some additional upgrades if you do decide to go Ultra. Now, the first thing we need to note is while the camera hardware on the Ultra looks very similar to last year's model, the camera tech on the base 22 and Plus have received some nice upgrades. And know that the camera setup on the base and Plus models is the same. This year on the base S22, you get a big 50 megapixel primary wide sensor to go along with the 12 megapixel ultra wide and 10 megapixel 3x telephoto sensor. and I think you will be happy with the results from all three. The ultra-wide and 3x telephoto cameras should actually offer up similar pictures and video to the Ultra. The big advantages the Ultra has is with its mammoth 108 megapixel primary wide sensor and its additional telephoto sensor that can optically zoom up to 10 times and can digitally zoom up to 100 times. The Ultra also has a laser sensor to help with faster autofocus. Finally, for all you selfie kings and queens out there, the front-facing camera on the Ultra is a ridiculous 40 megapixel shooter, while the Base and Plus offer a much more standard yet still serviceable 12 megapixel shooter. Now, I don't have the S22 Ultra in hand yet, but when comparing photos and videos from the base S22 to the S21 Ultra, I have to say in most circumstances the base S22 holds up well. Really well, like normally you're not going to be able to tell the difference kind of well. The last biggest difference you will find when comparing phones in the S22 line is the S Pen. Last year, Samsung brought S Pen functionality to the S21 Ultra. This year, Samsung has put the S Pen inside the S22 Ultra, basically making it the true successor to the Galaxy Note 20. Whether or not this matters to you will obviously depend on whether or not you think you will use an S Pen with your phone. If you are an S Pen person, you are probably going to want the Ultra. Otherwise, the other two phones are probably still in play. The only other real differences between the S22 models are Wi-Fi speeds, battery life, and charging speeds. The Ultra and Plus models have Wi-Fi 6E, while the base 22 only has vanilla Wi-Fi 6. However, unless you have a wireless router that supports 6E, you won't notice any difference. Predictably, battery capacity is different on all three devices due to their differences in size. And while the 3700 mAh battery on the base 22 may seem small compared to its big brothers, early reports are that the battery life on this phone is still actually pretty good. In my own experience with the phone, I can tell you that the base 22 will get you through a normal day of usage without issue. However, if you do a lot of gaming or camera work, you will probably need to top off during the day at some point. But you will probably have to do that with the Plus and the Ultra as well. My 21 Ultra has a 5000 mAh battery and I always have to top off on filming days. Lastly, the base 22 only offers 25 watt charging, while the Plus and Ultra offer 45 watt charging. And while this is a bit of a bummer, you have to remember all of Samsung's flagships maxed out at 25 watt charging last year, and all the S21 users that I know, including myself, seem to have survived just fine. So at the end of the day, how does the base S22 fit in with the rest of the S22 lineup? As I mentioned earlier, all of the phones in the S22 line are more alike than different. The biggest differences being the displays, the cameras, the S Pen, and of course, price. With the exception of size and a small difference in peak brightness, the displays on the base 22 and 22 Plus are identical. And while the display on the Ultra does have some spec advantages over the other models, I think the biggest factors are size and whether or not you prefer a flat or a curved display. If you are someone who likes a flat display and values portability over size, then I think the base 22 might be your jam. Camera hardware on the base and Plus variants is also identical. The Ultra does have some better camera hardware than the others, at least on paper, but if you don't think you're going to take advantage of all the resolution coming out of that 108 megapixel primary sensor or the zoom capabilities, then I'm not sure how much that hardware really matters. The S Pen is a great tool for people who will use it. For everyone else, it's just something to get lost. Finally, the base 22, while not cheap, is the most affordable phone in the S22 lineup, and honestly, unless you really need that bigger screen, I think it will probably give most people the best bang for their buck. Well, that's all the information I have today about the base S22. Are you thinking about picking up a phone from the S22 lineup, or do you already have it? If so, please feel free to share your experiences down in the comments so we can all continue to learn from each other and make more informed buying decisions. As always, I hope you found this video useful. Thanks for watching, and until next time, this is Rando Tech Info, signing out.